Hey, my name's James Nicholson. I hope you guys are well. We've had a big update on interest rates. What is expected to happen in interest rates? And this has come from Jerome Powell, who is in charge of the Federal Reserve in America, and Andrew Bailey, who is in charge of the Bank of England. Now, there was a very big conference on Friday of last week called the Jackson Holes Conference. And at that, both Jerome Powell and Andrew Bailey did speeches at that. And they talked about policy. They talked about what can we expect with interest rates going forward. And I'm going to share that with you in this video. It's well worth watching to find out exactly what is expected to happen for the rest of 2024. Now, before we jump into this, as always, if you haven't done already, do subscribe to the channel over there and hit the bell notification. We had so many subscribers yesterday, 250 subscribers in one day, which was great. Have a look around this video. You'll see how close we are to 28,000 subscribers. We might be there already, or it could be your subscription that gets us there. And while you're here, smash like, tickle like, do something to that like button, guys. That really helps with the YouTube algorithm and gets more views on the channel. So I appreciate everybody that does that. So what's been going on? Well, Jackson Holes is a big conference and you get some very big speakers there. To say that you got Jerome Powell and Andrew Bailey at your conference is pretty spectacular. But they did. And they were talking inflation, they were talking interest rates, and gave some very big hints that have been picked up by the media over the last few days. Now, inflation obviously was something that really hit a lot of people. We had 14 consecutive interest rate rises from the Bank of England. We went from pretty much zero interest rates to 5.25, and we've just started the rate cutting cycle. So we went from 5.25 down to 5%. Now, this surprised a few people when this happened in August. And the reason for that is that normally the Bank of England follow the Fed. So what we mean by that is if the Fed increases interest rates, the Bank of England will also do the same. If the Fed cut interest rates, the Bank of England will also follow. So it's not common that we would go out there and do it ourselves first, but we did. Now, since then, the pound has got a bit stronger as well. It's actually, I think, at a 2-year high now, which is good. And that's one reason why we don't like to do cuts differently to the Federal Reserve, because normally the pound would drop in value. Well, actually, it's gone up in value recently, and that's because of the expectations are that the Federal Reserve is likely to start cutting rates. So Jerome Powell did a speech at the Jackson Holes event, the conference, and this is what he said. The time has come to adjust policy. The time has come to adjust policy. That is music to my ears and should be to you. And what it means as such is that they are changing the policy of keeping rates in restrictive territory, and they're going to cut in September. It's a foregone conclusion. They've been hinting at this in other conferences, other speeches that other members of the Federal Reserve have been doing because they want the markets to get prepared for what's coming down the pipeline. They're likely to cut. Now, the likelihood would have been that they would have cut 0.25%, but there's a lot of people in the market that feel now that the Fed might cut in September by 0.5%, which is a little more than normal. And in this speech, they also talked about job data isn't maybe as good as they were hoping. In fact, the Biden-Harris government last week actually revised down some of their data and said, actually, the jobs data we said that we've got is actually about 800,000 worse than we were expecting. So the Federal Reserve was talking about jobs are starting to, or unemployment is starting to go up in America, hinting that maybe some more bad job data is on the way. If that happens, the Fed might need to act a little bit sooner in order to bring down these interest rates. Now, they are on a similar rate to us, 5.25% to 5.5%. And so the likelihood is that it's on a knife edge with the Federal Reserve. Will they cut 0.5%? Will they cut 0.25%? Now, if they cut 0.5%, that's good for the Bank of England, because that means that we could cut 0.25% and still be following the Fed, because we'd have done our first quarter in August, we could do our second quarter base cut in September and still be parallel with them, and that would strengthen the pound maybe a little bit more. So the Andrew Bailey, what was he discussing at this Jackson Hole's meeting even? He said that inflation is fading quicker than they expected. Inflation is fading quicker than they expected. That is really, really interesting as well. And you've got to listen. They don't directly say, and the Bank of England don't directly say, look, we're going to cut rates in September. But they do use language and imply stuff. And that's good, right? Because they were talking, the Bank of England was saying that they felt inflation would go back up to 2.75% by the end of 2024. That was their expectation due to energy costs. Well, what's actually happened is the expectation for last month was that it would go to 2.3%. It didn't. It went to 2.2%. So they probably have some data already that they know that the inflation isn't likely to get to this 2.75% if they're starting to talk like that. They're not going to say inflation is actually a bit weaker than we were expecting, and then it goes up higher than that 2.75 in their forecast, because then they look stupid, right? That isn't what they want to do. So here's what we're likely to see. We're likely to see that the Federal Reserve, 99.9% sure that they're going to cut their central bank interest rate in September. I think it's around the 18th of September. If they go 0.5%, I feel that the Bank of England will go another 0.25%. That will give them the permission to be able to do that and the freedom to be able to do that without interrupting the markets or without causing too many problems for the pound. And I think that's what will happen. If they go 0.25%, then the Bank of England, I feel, it is again then going to be a toss-up. So I would say if they go 0.5%, I'd say it's pretty likely that we'll go 0.25% and match them on the way down. If they go 0.25%, I think it's really toss a coin to decide whether they will continue with their rate cutting. But the positive language that we've got to look from this Jackson Hole's conference is the fact that the Bank of England are letting us know that inflation is potentially weaker than they were expecting. That is very good. We kind of knew already that the Federal Reserve was going to cut interest rates in September, but this is another confirmation. If they weren't going to do that, they would have said, we need to see what the data is. They're saying that the policy is changing, and that means interest rates are coming down. Now, what does that mean for your mortgage rate? Well, potentially it could mean that your mortgage rate gets a little cheaper. My prediction is that by around November this year, you'll get more rates that are around 3.5%. There are a few at that at the moment. If you look at a buy-to-let mortgage by the Mortgage Works, they've got 3.49. I think you'll see other lenders starting to get rates nearer that sort of level. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think that the Federal Reserve will cut in September? And what do you think the Bank of England will do in September? Do always comment below. Smash that like button, guys, if you've got this far. Subscribe. You never know, you could be the 28,000th subscriber. You can see around this video how close we are to that. And do check out all the other content on my channel, including this video right here.